Do you remember it? That specific time of day, the school bus would drop you off at the corner. You'd race inside, your backpack thudding against your back with each step. You'd throw your books on the kitchen table, grab a snack, maybe some crackers or a juice box, and then plant yourself in front of the television. It was a sacred ritual for so many of us growing up in the 1980s and 90s. The world outside, with its homework and chores, could wait just a little longer. There was something important about to happen on that screen. This wasn't just another cartoon or sitcom. This was something different, something that felt important. This was the era of the after-school special. The very name evokes a sense of anticipation. It wasn't part of the regular programming schedule. It was an event. The familiar theme music would start, often with a montage of serious-looking teenagers, and you knew you were in for a story that would stick with you. It was a unique kind of television, designed specifically for us kids and teens. The glow from that cathode ray tube was more than just light. It was a window into worlds and problems that felt incredibly real, even if they were happening to fictional characters. For those who didn't grow up in that specific window of time, the term after-school special might sound a bit quaint. What were they, really? Essentially, they were standalone television movies or one-off episodes of an anthology series, like the ABC After School Special, CBS School Break Special. They aired in the late afternoon, targeting kids who'd just gotten home from school, not escapist fantasy. Their purpose was educational, message-driven, designed to tackle issues, big, heavy Capital One issues, things regular sitcoms only touched on in a special episode. These programs were a product of their time. Networks faced pressure from parent groups and bodies like the FCC, so they needed to show they provided educational, socially responsible content. The after-school special became the perfect vehicle. They covered divorce, substance abuse, teenage pregnancy, eating disorders, public service announcements wrapped in teenage drama, and they became incredibly popular. Their popularity came from directness. While parents might have struggled with words, these shows dove right in. Characters were relatable, just kids dealing with real problems. Long before anxiety was a common word in our daily vocabulary, after-school specials were showing us what it looked like. They gave a face to that knot in your stomach, that racing heart, that feeling of being overwhelmed for no reason you could name. The characters in these shows didn't usually say, "I am having an anxiety attack." Instead, they would show it. A character might obsessively check their homework, terrified of getting a bad grade. They might avoid speaking in class, their hands trembling under the desk. Or they might have a meltdown over a seemingly small problem, because it was the one thing that made all their other bottled-up worries come spilling out. One of the most common themes was social anxiety, the fear of not fitting in, of being judged, of saying the wrong thing. We saw characters desperate to join the popular crowd, changing their clothes, their music taste, their personalities just to be accepted. These storylines were a mirror. They reflected the intense pressure we all felt to belong. An episode might focus on a new kid in school, navigating the terrifying landscape of the cafeteria at lunchtime, searching for a friendly face. As viewers, we felt their panic. The show was validating that feeling, telling us we weren't alone in our fears. Bullying is a timeless and painful part of the school experience for far too many. After-school specials confronted it head-on, long before there were widespread anti-bullying campaigns. These shows didn't shy away from the cruelty of it. They showed us the verbal taunts. They showed the social exclusion. They showed the physical intimidation. The stories made the pain of the victim palpable. We weren't just told that bullying was bad. We were made to feel the loneliness and humiliation. This was a powerful tool for building empathy in young viewers. A classic storyline, a quiet, sensitive kid, targeted by a popular, aggressive classmate. The specials were good at exploring the why. They didn't just present bullies as one-dimensional villains. Often, we'd get a glimpse into the bully's life. Maybe they had a difficult home situation, or were dealing with their own insecurities. An episode like The Terrible Secret might reveal abuse at home. These narratives also explored the role of the bystander. They showed kids who watched and did nothing out of fear. They showed kids who did nothing to avoid getting involved. The story would often hinge on one of these bystanders finding the courage to speak up or offering friendship to the victim. This sent a clear and powerful message. Your silence is a choice. It taught us that we have a responsibility to one another. Be the person who intervenes. Be the person who offers a kind word. Be the person who sits with the kid eating alone. These were lessons in resilience. Beyond the more dramatic topics, after-school specials spent a lot of time exploring the quiet, internal struggle for self-worth. This really is the foundation of so much of our mental health. So many episodes revolved around a character who felt they weren't good enough. Smart enough, pretty enough, talented enough, popular enough. That feeling of not measuring up is, well, a core part of the adolescent experience, and these shows put it center stage. Think of the episodes about body image, which were, honestly, incredibly common. A special like The Great Love Experiment might feature a girl who believes no one will like her unless she looks a certain way. We watched her agonize over her appearance, comparing herself to magazines, comparing herself to the more popular girls at school. These stories were airing decades before the pressures of social media, yet they perfectly captured the destructive nature of comparison. They showed us how an obsession with external validation could chip away at our sense of self. The lesson, delivered with sincerity, was always that true worth comes from within. These specials also tackled the pressure to succeed. There were countless stories about kids struggling with academic expectations or athletic expectations, often imposed by well-meaning but overbearing parents. We saw the character who cheats on a test because they're terrified of disappointing their father, or the athlete who plays through an injury just to secure a scholarship. These narratives were a powerful critique of a culture that, all too often, values achievement over well-being. The after-school special gave us permission to be imperfect. One of the most significant and perhaps subtle impacts of after-school specials was their ability to cultivate empathy. As a neuroscientist, I can tell you that empathy isn't just a feeling. It's a cognitive and emotional skill. It involves the ability to understand another person's perspective and to feel what they are feeling. These shows were, in essence, empathy training gyms for our developing brains. They consistently put us in the shoes of people whose lives were different from our own. We didn't just watch their problems, we experienced the world through their eyes for an hour. Consider the specials that dealt with social issues like poverty, racism. An episode might follow a character from a wealthy family who befriends a classmate from a much poorer background. Through their friendship, the privileged character, and by extension the viewer, would come to understand the daily struggles and hidden burdens of poverty. We would see the shame of not having enough money for a field trip or the stress of having parents who work multiple jobs. These weren't political lectures, they were human stories. They broke down stereotypes, replaced them with nuanced, personal experiences, forcing us to see the humanity behind the label. These shows also didn't shy away from disabilities. An episode might feature a character who is deaf-blind, uses a wheelchair. The narrative would focus on their experiences, their frustrations with an inaccessible world, their desire to be treated like everyone else. We learned about their capabilities, not just their limitations. By consistently exposing us to a wide range of human experiences, these shows expanded our capacity for empathy. The genius of the after-school special was in its subtlety. Yes, the messages were often direct, and the endings could be a bit tidy. But the real learning wasn't just in the final moral of the story. It was embedded in the entire process. The most important lesson we were learning without even realizing it was that it was okay to talk about difficult feelings. The very existence of these shows normalized conversations about topics that were often considered taboo or uncomfortable. They created a space where fear, sadness, confusion could be openly acknowledged. These shows provided us with a shared emotional vocabulary. After an episode about divorce aired, you might hear kids at school talking about it the next day. Did you see that show yesterday? It was a safe way to broach the topic. You weren't talking about your own parents. You were talking about the characters. But through that conversation, you could gauge how your friends felt, and maybe even share a piece of your own experience. The show acted as a social lubricant, making it easier to connect on a deeper, more vulnerable level. It was a mediated form of group therapy for an entire generation. Moreover, these specials modeled the act of seeking help. This is a critical component of mental health that is often difficult to teach. In so many of these stories, the turning point came when the struggling protagonist finally confided in someone. It might have been a parent, a teacher, a school counselor, or even a friend. The show demonstrated that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a courageous step toward healing. It showed that you don't have to carry your burdens alone. This is a form of social-emotional learning. We thought we were just watching a dramatic story, but we were actually attending a masterclass in emotional intelligence and ethical reasoning. The echoes of those after-school specials resonate in our adult lives in ways we might not fully appreciate. Those early lessons, absorbed in the soft glow of the television, became part of our internal architecture. They helped form our moral compass and our emotional toolkit. For many of us, these shows were our first exposure to the idea that people's internal worlds are complex and often troubled. That quiet understanding laid the groundwork for a greater acceptance of mental health issues as we grew older. Think about the way we, as a generation, talk about mental health now. There's a growing openness, a willingness to share our struggles with anxiety, depression. Where did that come from? Part of it, I believe, can be traced back to those early formative media experiences. The after-school specials cracked the door open. They told us these struggles were real and worthy of attention. They planted the idea that psychological pain is just as valid as physical pain. As adults, we have pushed that door wide open, building on the foundation that was laid for us in those one-hour television dramas. These stories also influenced our parenting. Many of us who grew up watching these specials are now parents ourselves. We remember the communication gaps, parents who didn't understand, kids who felt they couldn't talk to them. Consciously or not, many of us strive to be the after-school special parent, the one who listens, who asks questions, who creates a safe space for our children to share their fears and insecurities. We are trying to be the adult that the characters in those shows so desperately needed. In a way, we are trying to provide the happy ending that the specials always promised was possible. Ultimately, these shows taught us the power of narrative. They showed us that stories can heal, they can connect, and they can create change.